So are we exiting peak hype?
No, I don't think so. I think peak hype will continue.
Peak
But
hype.
it's not a bad thing. It's like, it sounds horrible that it's all hype, but it is delivering value.
This is Sovereign DBaaS Decoded, a podcast for IT leaders and implementers looking to reliably scale database ops while maintaining control of their data stack. In each episode, we join industry experts to discuss the what and why of sovereignty and how you can implement a sovereign DBaaS concept of your own using open source databases, deployment models, and tooling. Let's get started.
Okay. Hello and welcome to 2026 first episode of Sovereign DBaaS Decoded. I'm Vinay Joosery and this episode is brought to you by Several Nines. Our guest today is Sanjeev Mohan, Principal Analyst at SanjMo and former Gartner VP. Thanks for joining us today, Sanjeev.
And thank you so much, Vinay. This is our annual tradition. This is how we start the year.
It is indeed. It is indeed. This is the fourth time, I believe, you're on the show. And you've been on the road quite a bit last year, right? So we look forward to having you here sharing your insights, right?
My pleasure.
So let's see what we can expect for today. We'll get an update from Sanjeev on the state of the cloud. But first, we'll recap the cloud and the database space in 25, right? The major influences, events, surprises. We'll see what's going on today and look forward to 26. But before we do, let's start with some of the 2025 predictions we made last year. Let's grade ourselves. So number one, did hyperscaler and enterprise investment accelerate, especially for AI infrastructure? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. For AI infrastructure, there is no doubt. We saw not only a lot of investments increase, but there became a bit of a trickery, to be very honest, because there were this whole circular motion of investments. The matter of the fact is that NVIDIA has a lot of money that it's generating and it needs to protect itself because it's no longer just GPUs from NVIDIA. AMD was at last week's CES conference in Las Vegas. They have their things. NVIDIA also bought a Grok, which was a competitor on the inference side, but Google TPUs finally, I think in 2025, they came of age. And why I say that is because TPUs were already there for many years, but they were only meant for Google's own consumption. But now even Anthropic is using TPUs. And then, of course, AWS with Graviton and then Trainium. Trainium 3 was a big thing for them last year. So because of this increased competition on the hardware infrastructure, on the model side from model companies in China, US companies, so it's led to a lot of investment.
Yeah, so I guess that was a good prediction.
Yes.
It came in with the caveat that there are these circular transactions between some large players. We'll see how that pans out.
We'll see what happens in 2026 because I don't know if we can say the same for 2026. But anyway, we'll come to
Yes.
2026 later.
So the second one, we talked about the regulatory environment, right? That it will expand, right?
Yeah.
We see that the EU AI Act phased rollout, right? It continued during 25, right? From training your staff to having responsible AI, limiting harmful AI practices, hidden manipulation, exploiting vulnerable groups, real-time biometric surveillance, right? So there is a surge in these sovereign clouds in the EU, right? And this is since the new administration in the US. And the EU is making a concerted effort, right, to become more competitive and reduce its independence on hyperscalers. So we at Several Nines, we are part of this initiative from the private sector, Eurostack, which actually was created sometime last summer, right, to ensure there's European-made hardware and software alternatives. And by the way, this is not just in the EU that we see this sovereignty movement, right?
Yes, correct.
Asia, Middle East.
Yep.
But again, coming back to the prediction, regulation is driving certain changes. What do you see there?
Yeah, so I see both sides. Or in the US, for example, the new administration is trying to ban individual states. So we have 50 states in the country from having their own regulations. And without getting into politics, I think having one standard is so much better than trying to adhere to 50 different standards. But the states are fighting back because they feel it's their prerogative how they want to regulate AI. But rest of the world, I think AI regulation has literally taken off much faster than what I had expected at the beginning of last year. And even the US hyperscalers, they all now have European sovereign cloud. Either their own, like Microsoft and AWS, or through a partner, like in case of Google. And then the more these AI models are getting advanced and they have the capability of producing inappropriate content or do all kinds of like things that are not right, the role of regulations is actually going up. Even in 2026, in the first week, we have seen EU AI Act come out with a new set of policies on transparency of how the model generated its results. So I think this came true last year and it'll continue even more this year.
And actually about a month ago, the EU Commission fined X, right? Elon Musk's X, 120 billion euros, right? For not being transparent on the platform, not allowing researchers access to see what's going on. So I think that there's definitely more and more, let's say these regulations, they're getting more teeth. They're getting longer, sharper teeth.
Yes, that is true. Yes.
So prediction number 3, we have been talking every year. There's always talk about, enterprises' top concern, CIO's top concern is cloud costs. This has been a long concern, for ages, and that spending party, has it ended, right? We talked about probably people will try to do something. I was looking up some statistics. According to Gartner, worldwide spending on public cloud services was around 723 billion in 2025, and that's up roughly 20% from 24, right? Now the question is, what portion of that is AI accelerated, right? And I saw something else from Goldman Sachs where they say 20%, actually 10-15% is actually directly due to AI workloads. So that's it. That's only a few percent for actual, other workload being, people spending more. So companies are spending more, but not necessarily for traditional workloads, right? And I guess cost is still an issue for enterprises, but there is a case for optimizing, right-sizing, and managing usage more tightly. But we haven't seen a reduction in cost. I mean, if ever, enterprises are spending more than ever on the cloud. What's your take on this?
So Vinay, we talk about cost quite a bit, but I think focus on cost hides the value equation. So if companies are spending a lot of money, why is that? They're probably because they're getting value out of it. On the data side, things I would say are not any different from last few years. Cost has been going up, but we also see there's a lot of improvements in utilization. I see a lot of performance enhancement capabilities. The big cost factor is actually AI, because on a daily basis, OpenAI probably loses hundreds of millions of dollars every day. And so they're talking about losses in billions of dollars, but then they expect that AI is going to get so entrenched and there'll be agents running around doing so much work, and there's going to be so much consumption of tokens that they will break out and be profitable. Actually, Anthropic is pretty gung ho about it. OpenAI doesn't seem to be that concerned, because to our first point, the investments have been so high that they can ride this wave. But I don't see any concern for data side. For AI, all bets are off. We don't know which company will survive.
All
So I
right.
would say our assessment would be yellow.
Yellow. Okay.
Yeah. If the first one was green, then this would be yellow.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, for sure, looking at the numbers, 20% growth, right? People spend more, and
yeah,
then, how much of that is AI and actually traditional workloads, right?
yes, correct.
And you would probably argue that AI is where people are doing the innovation, right? That's a lot of
Yeah.
the new value being created. But for stable, static workloads that don't change that much,
Yeah.
that's
Also, I think open source also is marching on strong and steady. For example, Vinay, I saw you some time ago at KubeCon, and you saw how many observability companies there were. Each observability company would have its own engine, its own way to ingest data and store data, process it. But now, what I'm seeing in the observability space, for example, and I'm moving away from my core data, but into observability, infrastructure observability. Now there's a standard called OpenTelemetry, which means same format and same way of processing, from ingestion from any kind of source in any language, whether it's a C program or Rust, it doesn't matter. There's a standard for logs, metrics, traces. And then when you write it on an object store in a Parquet file with Iceberg as your table format. And that means now any compute engine, open source or not, can analyze that data. So there are these subtle changes happening, not just on the data side, but pretty pervasive. And I think some of these will reduce costs because they're removing that vendor lock-in.
Yeah, and even if you look at, for example, the protocol to speak to MongoDB, right? You have document
Yeah.
DB, right? And where they're trying to standardize, just like SQL, you use SQL to talk to relational databases. Well, you need to have they want to have it like a document protocol to talk to
Yeah.
document databases. And that's also helps when it comes to maybe, vendor lock-in,
Yeah.
able to move from a proprietary solution to an open source solution and save money.
Yeah, so in relational, we've always had Postgres. In document databases, JSON, we now have document DB. In key value, we have something called Apache Valkey, which is a spin-off of Redis. And
Yeah.
in search, we've got Apache or Linux Foundation OpenSearch, which
Source, yes.
is an offshoot of Elastic. So you see there are these open source, and then of course we've always had Cassandra for columnar. So in every stack, every type of data storage, there is an open source version now available.
Yeah. Yes. Now, prediction number 4, Sanjeev. Cloud repatriation becomes legit, right? And the question is, is there? We were kind of expecting there would be more repatriation, and this is a tough one because we
Yeah.
don't see much evidence on it publicly, right? But we had Dave Linthicum on this show last year, right? Sometime, I don't know, summer last year. And according to him, there's quite a bit of repatriation going on, but they are not publicized, right? So enterprises treat repatriation as internal infrastructure strategy rather than something to, announce publicly. But if we look at Flexera's 2025 cloud survey, it shows that roughly 21% of workloads have been repatriated back to private data centers.
Only one.
What do you make of it? What's your take? We don't hear about like those crazy cases like Geico. I think we have Signal 18. We've had a bunch of like marquee case studies the previous years, but now we don't hear about the big ones.
Those like Signal 18, a lot of those use cases get circulated over and over. I think there's another one, Dropbox, a box, one of them, that Dropbox, right? So you hear them all the time. For years, you are hearing these things, which tells you that there are not any new mega repatriation use cases. Something strange happened in 2025. On-premises became, I think, came to the equal footing as a public cloud, in my opinion. But it wasn't because of repatriation. It is because there was this urgent need for companies to leverage all of the data they have on premises in SharePoints and OneDrive or these PDF documents, even paper documents that needed to be OCR'd, because now multimodal models have become really good and in extracting these entities. So I think a lot of workload has now moved to on-prem, to a point where even US now has finally accepted that the world will be hybrid and multi-cloud. That was a big finding from AWS reInvent, because for years they said, no, everything's moving to the cloud. So so it may not be repatriation itself that is happening, but the fact that 70% of data is still on-prem and now it is being unlocked by cloud, except that cloud is on-prem. And I know we'll be talking quite a bit about sovereignty. That is the other use case. So there are all these use cases that are making on-prem equally a first-class citizen like cloud. So it used to be the second-class citizen.
It used to be a swear word. If you said on-prem, people would think, hey, this is,
I see even companies like Cloudera's big mission is private AI. That's their goal, because I think they've realized that cloud is crowded and there's just too much going on. People forgot on-prem, and now they're like waking up and going, oh wait, all this unstructured data is sitting on-prem. So I need to come back, and that's where 70% of all data is. And I'm making up 70%. I've seen even 80, 90% as volume of data on-prem versus in the cloud.
Yeah. Talking about unstructured data, that takes us to the next one, which is AI projects, right? AI use cases go beyond copilots, right? So we think that maybe there will be much more in production. Well, I guess, you probably saw that MIT report from last August. 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing, right? So there's a rush to integrate all these AI models, but 95% of these programs, they stall, they deliver little to no measurable impact on, profit and loss. Why is that? We talk about unstructured data. Is it an issue of, having data quality to be able to make something out of it? What's your take on that?
Vinay, I'm not a big fan of that report, to be honest, because it has MIT Nanda lab stamped on it, so it got a lot of coverage. But I think their sample size it wasn't as big, and there's just so many nuances. I was talking to a pharma company that was telling me how much AI is saving them. When you have a new drug development, it takes 10 to 20 years and costs $4 billion. 2,000 documents need to be submitted to the FDA in the US for approval. Different languages, slight modifications of formulas. It is such a massive effort that AI help, and AI is really good in document generation. So for AI, this is an easy task to take care of. So the savings are actually in millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars. But because this is very proprietary. People don't talk about it. So when I talk to end users, I find that people are using AI quite a bit. Like somebody asked me, is there a killer use case of AI? You know what my response is? What is the killer use case of World Wide Web? The internet that we know, or social media. It's very hard to pin it down. So it's basically, sometimes it may not be a thing, it may be a process. You made the process so automated that you're saving money everywhere in small amounts, so it adds up, but it's all proprietary knowledge, and no company wants to tell the world what's going on because of all the legal issues. So my point is that we moved. Actually, our prediction last year should have been, will agents take off? And agents not only took off, they just flew off the shelf. But we still have not reached a stage where we can confidently say, I can put in a chatbot, an assistant, or agent, and it'll do a complex business logic for me. Document generation, customer service. So we're doing a lot of these very specific task-oriented jobs, and I think for that AI has proved to be very successful. When it comes to automating the entire supply chain process through a multi-agent thing, we are not there.
And without a human being in the loop.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. All right. So we didn't do that bad, actually.
No, I think we did great. Yeah.
So looking back at some of the significant influences, right, and events in 25, right? So geopolitical, we have the AI supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Chips, export controls, access paths, governments putting, these sanctions on, these should not be exported. Or if you're in the EU, if you're part of these 12 countries, you can get the latest chips. If not, you can't, which kind of splits the EU because, for example, Sweden would get the latest chips, but Poland wouldn't, right? There's like these tier 1 and tier 2, countries. So that's kind of a weird one.
Yeah, I wasn't aware.
In terms of economic, right? I mean, capital probably gets more selective, right? Show me the revenue, not just the GPUs. I mean, we've seen the financial scrutiny, right, on these giant data center bets, right? You're an ex-Oracle guy, right? So you probably read about the $300 billion deal, right?
Yep.
$300 billion deal that Oracle did with OpenAI over 5 years, right, to provide compute. I mean, Oracle, how do they fund that investment in these data centers, and how does OpenAI find $300 billion to pay for this, right? So I think there's a little bit of scrutiny because I think all the markets took off when they are announcing these deals, right, between chip makers, between AI model providers, between hyperscalers, but it's all circular. And now I think everybody's saying, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of a cheating.
Yeah. I mean, OpenAI has committed to a spend of $1.4 trillion, and what is their revenue? $14 billion. So there is just like orders of magnitude more money they want to spend that they're not making. It's literally, we are living in the craziest times. I'll give you an example. Last week was CES, as I said earlier, in Las Vegas. Jensen Huang did his own thing, not CES keynote. That was by AMD CEO. So he sort of sucked the oxygen out of the room. So he does his own event. And he starts talking about how there are this new Vera Rubin architecture that's coming out in 2026. And it's so advanced, there's 2 miles of copper wiring inside it. Within minutes, the stocks of copper companies went up. Then he goes on to say that this is such an advanced architecture that it doesn't even need much cooling. All of a sudden, all these companies that provide cooling equipment to the data center, their stocks went down. So with everything, so we are living in these unprecedented times where the expectations are just so high from AI that it's literally driving the entire world's economy. S&P 500 consists of S&P 7 and S&P 493. S&P 7 are making like all the money, and then 493 are just trying to figure out what do they do next. So,
Yeah. That was the financial. Yeah, there's a lot of financial events going on, along with geopolitics. And then if we look at the regulatory aspects, right, same thing, right? You mentioned EU, the AI Act, right? These phased obligations, right? They are in effect, and that's driving these compliance work streams. And I guess since last year, I mean, my LinkedIn literally is exploding with all these sovereignty talks, right, from all these companies and entities in Europe, right? And well, actually, not just Europe. I mean, you have Canada, you have Southeast Asia. So everywhere is kind of like it's people are looking at procurement rules, sector rules, mandates to actually purchase local instead of maybe the default going to where it was going, right? If you look at Europe, I mean, I think 4 or 5 years ago, the hyperscalers, they had like 30-40% of the cloud market. The cloud market has grown very fast, and the hyperscalers from last year, they had in Europe, I think they had 80% of the market, and it's kind of like it's gone up, and local providers are nowhere to be seen pretty much. But we've seen a bunch of announcements last year, people investing, governments investing, you have these giga, what they call it, these giga factories, AI factories that they're building in Europe. So let's see where that takes us.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I was saying, if I were to jump to 2026 predictions, I would say one of my predictions is that sovereignty shifts left. And let me explain what I mean by that is, to be honest, sovereignty was not top of my mind topic, because I get very deep into all kinds of data AI stuff from technology point of view. Actually, I would say several lines pulled me into this space more than anybody else. But now I can't avoid it, because every cloud provider event I go to and I do a briefing with them, sovereignty is really high on their list. Every one of them. At AWS reInvent, AWS announced their first data center was going to go live end of December 2025. I don't know if it did, in Brandenburg, which is part of ESC, European Sovereign Cloud. It is an initiative that is owned, operated, run, managed by Europeans, not by Americans. So AWS had launched that. Before that, I was at Microsoft Ignite. Microsoft Sovereign Cloud was a very big topic even there. When I did a briefing with Google Cloud, and it was all about sovereign cloud, but they're taking a very different approach. They're saying that, let's say a hospital wants to have their data in a cloud in Europe, they don't want necessarily to go to a partner. So what Google is doing is they're partnering with local providers.
Correct.
Because these providers have regulations like SecNum, and they're keeping up with everything new in EU AI Act. Just last week, something new came out. So, and then India introduced, China has its own, like you said. So basically, when my prediction, the sovereignty shifts left. What I mean by that is, up to this point, sovereignty is considered to be a very narrowly focused data residency issue. Where is your data resident? But by shifting left, it becomes an architectural thing. It's not just like, does your contract, Mr. Cloud Provider, have sovereignty? It is, did I design it to be sovereign from ground up? Are my keys in my own control, or are my encryption keys sitting in my cloud provider, although my data is in-house? So not just data, operations, technology, assurance, all that gets designed into my architecture. So sovereignty becomes a design criteria rather than a contract.
Yeah. And that was actually, you just mentioned one of the main events that happened also, right? AWS, Microsoft push for these concrete sovereign offerings, right? And
Yes.
and kind of like this helps keep this podcast sovereignty thesis front and center. So we've been doing this for now 3.5 years. We thought it might become a thing. It was looking like something serious, but as you said, it's now it's growing, and it's kind of like mainstream. I mean, everybody's talking about sovereignty now, even some of my neighbors who are not in IT, right? So I had some other events on my list. So power becomes the new rate limiter, right? Grid rules, regulator attention, interconnection, maybe collocating next to generation, right? I mean, we see like in Sweden, some areas, people want to build power plants, right? Well, there's no capacity, right? But then somebody else comes in and say, hey, I want to build a new data center and I need like that much power. Well, sorry, you can't, because now we need to wait until we have, either more transmission or, we need to have new power generation, right? So kind of that's one of the, it's interesting how now power is suddenly becoming part of cloud strategy. You have, AI, this kind of disciplined build out, right? I think that's that, let's say the scale of spending is enormous, right? The pace is unprecedented, right? We spoke about the Oracle OpenAI deal. So I think that's kind of, another event, let's say, that we'll see how that affects things in 26, right? Probably we won't see much more of those. And then, VMware Broadcom, I think it's still kind of reshaping private cloud. I mean, that trend is still there. I was at OpenStack again last year, the Open Infra conference, and there's so much new projects, with like, 2, 3, 4 new projects moving stuff off VMware into OpenStack, right? You have Nutanix growing, you have some other companies doing well there, and obviously Kubernetes, that's another huge let's say trend, right? But what do you make of this? I mean, let me see, Kubernetes, is there something you've seen? I mean, going to the KubeCons, these are massive events. I mean, you see all these providers, as you mentioned, doing whatnot. Where do you see this going? I mean, looking at the later Kubernetes stuff, it seems there's more and more AI taking over the Kubernetes, the KubeCons.
Yeah, I think Kubernetes started off for stateless applications. And it took almost 10 years for them to finally figure out how to do stateful application databases. But it took that long. And Kubernetes is only 11 years old. So this is the reality. But with AI, I think Kubernetes gets a shot in its arm, because it certainly, we need to provision so much of compute, and when you provision so much of compute, things go wrong. So you need them to self-start, self-heal, manage them, start up and shut them down quickly. This compute is also very expensive, because a lot of it is GPUs. So I see there's a lot of work, like NVIDIA has done a lot of work in this space, although independent of CNCF, which is very surprising. But I think one school of thought is that Kubernetes and AI are made for each other. Then there are other people I talk to who are like, Kubernetes is complicated, and do I really need to introduce another layer for AI? And who knows how the story will pan out. But I think Kubernetes benefits a lot from helping to orchestrate AI workloads.
Yeah. So that was a little bit of a review, right? Let's shift gears to today. And AI is still the topic, right? So let's start there. And I will quote you, Sanjeev, right, from your 2026 New Year blog, right? I would encourage our listeners here to hit your blog. If 2024 was AI everywhere and 25 was AI build out, what is 2026?
Yeah, good question. I think I would say 2025 didn't really pan out as we had expected. We started the year thinking that there'd be agents for everything. I made a prediction that next year, by this time when we talk, we'll all have a personal agent. Well, it's my goal for 2026. But it didn't happen last year. And the hottest topic, by the way, in AI is reinforcement learning. There is so much emphasis going on how do you do post training, because we are coming to a conclusion that the models have grown bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's pretty much it. They're trained on everything on the internet that they could lay their hands on, not private data. But now, to improve reliability, we need to do post training, and the teacher training model, or teacher student model, RLHF. There's just so many techniques to do optimization of models. So I think what we'll see in 2025 is that models are going to get even better. They're already very good, I have to say, but they will never be deterministic. They were never supposed to be deterministic, but they will get to a level that's good enough for people to deploy them without having a sleepless night and worrying about what if the AI says something stupid and makes me lose my business. So I think we are in the era of building reliable AI. So AI governance was a very big topic for me. In 2024, it didn't pan out because in 2024, we didn't even know what we were doing. We were experimenting. 25 also. I think this is the year when AI governance will get established and we'll have more reliable, and hence we'll see an acceleration of agents happen. Plus, we've got a lot of pretty solid use cases already. Coding is a solid use case, no question about it.
Yeah.
Customer service is to some extent. But now we see commerce. We see there are new commerce protocols that have come out. Agent to agent, MCP, all of these are standardizing a lot of missing pieces. So I think 2026 is when it will all come together.
Yeah. So are we exiting peak hype?
No, I don't think so. I think peak hype will continue.
Peak
But
hype.
it's not a bad thing. It's like, it sounds horrible that it's all hype, but it is delivering value. In fact, if you look at some of the new benchmarks surveys that have been done, there's one by Lenny, the podcast guy. 75% of people are saying they're getting value out of AI.
Yeah.
I myself can say that.
Yeah. So I guess governance, reliability. These are things that that is needed to actually make sure that this area flourishes, so to speak.
Yes, correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. What does it mean for the database? Right. I mean, stack consolidation.
Yeah. So the data layer is actually undergoing quite a revolution. 2025, I don't think we saw it coming, but for years and years we've been saying there's just way too many small companies and there needs to be some sort of consolidation, and it hardly happened. One acquisition here or there doesn't count. 2025 we saw some big moves. And I think 2026 we'll see even bigger moves. What the businesses are telling the industry is that we are done buying small features that are masquerading as a category. These all need to be, like, for example, observability. Is observability a category? Even data catalog. For years and years, we've been pushing data catalogs, and people are saying, well, these are so fundamental to what we do that they should really be part of the infrastructure rather than a standalone piece. Lineage, a lot of governance pieces. So the power right now is with mega vendors, hyperscalers, companies like Snowflake, Databricks, even Palantir, which is not a product company, it builds. So the bigger companies are actually seeing the advantage. Salesforce, for example, they all want to be your end-to-end data and AI company. That's it. The data, they originate the data, they transform, they store it in Iceberg. You bring your analytical engines, but the data does not leave their premise, their parameter.
Yeah, yeah. What does this mean for, the meat and potatoes spend? We talk about, because you have the AI projects, but then you have all the infrastructure, the old boring static stuff that's there that probably, people haven't maintained for a while, or maybe there are investments that are still waiting, are these like table stakes for this AI era?
So AI, as you can see, I'm an AI optimist. So there are people who think that they'll wake up one day and people will come to realization AI was overhyped and it's gone. It's like saying you're going back to pre-internet days. It's impossible, right? This is how we do business, from Spotify to taxes to emails to LinkedIn. So I don't think we are ever going to go back. Why am I an AI optimist is because we have a lot of junk that we have collected over the years. But we didn't know what to do with it because people who knew COBOL have retired. And it works. And if it works, then it's like, why fix something that's not broken? Is a concept. Well, AI can now literally be that unlock. It can help me migrate from an old version of a dead programming language. By the way, nothing ever goes away. It always lingers around. But now what I need is somebody to train a model in an older version of, let's say, Java, see enough programs, read enough documents, and then say, okay, I'm going to go from this old version of Enterprise Java Beans into let's say, Rust or something new, or a new version of Java. It doesn't matter. And I think we are going to start seeing that AI is going to be put to use. And it'll help us clean. Even data quality, data quality is a huge problem. We've never been able to fix data quality ever since data has existed. But because the way we try to fix it is so difficult and onerous. But if AI can say, step back, humans, I can go analyze this data, find correlations, find similarities, find patterns that it takes human beings years and years of doing a data model and then expensive things. I can find this. And by the way, you're in charge. So the human feedback, like you said, is still man in the loop or human in the loop is still there. Or woman in the loop, I just realized it's 2026. So that human in the loop should then says, yep, this is a good move. Wow, I can't believe you found this correlation. Go fix it.
Yeah. Data, I think we talked about bring compute to data, or do you move your data to compute? We mentioned earlier that there's a lot of more on-prem stuff because of all the data that's there, right? So it means people need to build. At the same time, cloud services, right? Cloud spend grew 20% last year over the previous year. 10-15% of that was allocated, was actually due to AI. So, what's winning?
So compute to data, absolutely. Moving data was never a good idea. In fact, I would even say, I don't think anytime soon, but ETL will finally become a thing of history. When you extract and transform, load it to a different place, now you've got overhead, all this movement skills are needed. A lot of technologies are now getting too old. They were used way back. So now that has to be modernized against a task for AI to modernize my transformation. But then there's latency of moving data. There's governance that is needed from source and target. So we are now moving into an era where we are building, in fact, context graphs is the hottest topic in my space in 2026. And we are only into the first few weeks of 2026, and it's already blowing up on social media. So if I can create a context graph and I can have an LLM go figure out where my data is, I don't need to necessarily move that data. So I think this is going to be a very big thing where ETL or ELT is going to be replaced by, first, it's already been replaced, by the way, in 2025 by zero ETL. But that's still, zero ETL is still extract and load, except you've taken it away from the end user and made it part of the system. But now zero copy is a very big thing. Putting stuff in Iceberg, like I said, and so now I can bring any compute engine, whether it's Spark, Pandas, DuckDB, anything that's Iceberg REST compatible. I can bring it. If I'm in AWS, I can use Athena, I can use Redshift. So that's a trend, is not just disaggregation of compute and store, but unbundling of it. So the compute and store are not just disaggregated; they come from different vendors, and that gives the end user more control and flexibility, which is what they've been asking for all this time. Even sovereignty and all of these topics are all about control. How does the end user control their data and bring the right compute engine, not the one that's mandated by the cloud provider?
No, right. Yeah. Now the next thing, cloud as an operating model, right? Has that taken hold? I mean, the right workload, at the right place as a policy, right? Whether it's in a public cloud, hosted, private, colocation, on-prem, Kubernetes.
I would say so. I think cloud many years ago went from being a destination, i.e. AWS or Google Cloud Storage or Azure Blob Storage, ADLS, to being an operating model that can be brought to on-prem. So I get the benefit of serverless. So cloud native things, I can do it, but I know I can only scale up to the hardware I have. So I know there's a ceiling for cost. Now, of course, there are options where you can jump into public cloud, so you can configure it different ways. But cloud is definitely an operating model.
Yeah. And it makes it easier if you have Kubernetes as the underlying engine, because it's almost more modern and understands all that good stuff. Yeah.
Correct.
So looking forward, to 2026, right, the road ahead, what do we watch specifically in infra workload placement, right? So hybrid becomes the default architectural pattern for AI and data, right? Not multi-cloud, right? Or there's a real
hybrid multi-cloud. I think cloud providers are all signing up these fast interconnect deals with each other, so it doesn't matter. Like, if there's no egress costs from Oracle to Microsoft, Azure, then I can leave my data in Oracle and I can use Power BI or Microsoft Azure ML or AI. And same thing just happened between AWS and Google, and will happen with Microsoft in 2026.
Right. So that's one of the predictions then. Hybrid multi-cloud, that's going to be big.
So
the other one is, sorry, go on.
I would state that where your data resides is going to become less and less important. Okay.
Yeah. The other one, which you actually already predicted earlier on this, is, let's say, the AI offerings. Well, sovereign AI, sovereign cloud, right? It will mature from these announcements to these enterprise rollouts, right? So, and there we expect buyers to demand operational sovereignty, not just residency, right? Because these are two concepts. That's what people have been confusing for a long time. Residency versus sovereignty.
Sovereignty, yes. I love
So
that. Yeah, that's number two. The number three is that AI will see a massive investment in reinforcement learning to improve its reliability and accuracy.
yeah, reinforcement learning. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, I mean, there's a lot of announcements for data centers, but the number of actual data centers being built is like 17% of what's been announced. That's what I read. There was like a, there was some metric that I read there. So how much do you think power and energy constraints will shape cloud regions and pricing and workload placement?
So, it's a tough question to answer because Canada, which sits to the north of where I live, has plenty of space and power, or at least natural power. But do we have transmission? And you mentioned transmission earlier. You see American companies are going to Saudi Arabia, which has a lot of oil and money, land, it's all there. But how do you get that power? I think power is going to be a constraining factor in the US. It will lead to data centers coming up. In fact, you see AWS for all the cloud providers have publicly said, we will not have capacity for you, consumers. We are going to sign up with these companies in Australia. There's a very famous company there. These are all, by the way, Bitcoin, crypto, mining companies. And now they're creating these, they're turning their crypto mining into a data center and leasing the capacity to hyperscalers.
Yeah, yeah. There's that. What should we watch specifically in the database as a service, the DB Ops stack? I mean, we talked about vector it's a feature, it's not a product category, right? Even MariaDB introduced vector last year, right?
Yep.
I mean, we know PG vector, right? Very popular. How do you see this moving?
Yeah. I don't see any like major moves in DB database as a service, DBAS, but I do see they'll get a lot more efficient. For example, having vectors is one thing, but how good is your vector index is a work in progress. So disk ENN from Microsoft, scan from Google, so they all are making it better and better. So there's less tokens needed, there's more caching of prompts, so there's less round trip to an LLM. All that we will see AI being used to optimize my database, like query optimization planner, for example. All of these backups and recovery, intelligent storage. So based on the usage patterns, it can move it to a cheaper storage. So we will see DBAS become a lot more sophisticated because of that, but no major thing that comes to my mind right now as far as new features.
Yeah. What you already mentioned is the architectural pattern, the sovereignty architectural pattern, right? So managed keys from customers, isolated control planes and operators. Although the fact is, if you are still on a US hyperscaler and you get sanctioned, then even if you have the key, if they shut down access,
correct,
right, you are in trouble. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's customer managed key, but at cloud, in the cloud provider, may not be such a good idea in such cases. Companies that are hugely regulated, I don't want to make it into a scare thing, but if you're hugely regulated, then you should probably manage your own keys.
Yeah, and finally, you also mentioned that already. You believe that we will see these agent-friendly operations, right? So policy approvals, audit trails, reliability, human in the loop kind of thing.
Correct.
All right. Well, let's wrap up. Well, Sanjeev, thanks again. This is great. So we've looked at 2025. It's been a year of crazy investments between these AI model builders, hyperscalers, and chip makers. Right. There's also these massive geopolitical changes, right, which is kind of fueling the sovereignty debate, right. A hybrid seems to be the way to go for cloud and AI. I'll leave you the last words.
Buckle up is all I can say. This is going to be the year when shit hits the fan. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that, but I did. So you can edit it if you want.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Sanjeev, and thank you all for listening. And have a great 2026.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining once again. Bye.